You think marrying young means you'll grow together. Pause, you won't. You'll grow apart. And by the time you realize it, you'll have spent 40 years sleeping next to a stranger you used to love. I'm William. I'm 87 years old. And I married a girl I barely knew when I was 19 years old, because I thought that's what men did. I stayed married for 43 years, and I wasted most of them. Dot clears throat, sit with me for a few minutes, because what took me 6 decades to understand, I'm going to give you right now. I grew up in a house where my father never smiled, not at my mother, not at us kids. He worked, he came home, he sat in his chair. That was marriage. That was what it looked like to be a man. I remember being 12 years old, watching my mother serve him dinner. She never sat down until he'd finished eating, and he never once thanked her. Not once. I used to think that was normal. I thought that's what wives did, what husbands expected. When I turned 18, I got a job at the rail yard, started making decent money, enough to feel like somebody. And there was this girl, her name was Dorothy. She worked at the diner across from the yard. Blonde hair, shy smile. She laughed at everything I said, even when I wasn't trying to be funny. We dated for 6 months. 6 months. And then one night her father pulled me aside and said, "You going to do right by my daughter, or are you wasting her time?" That's how it was back then. You dated a girl seriously, you married her. There was no other option. Not 1956, not in a town like ours. So I proposed, and she said yes. And 3 months later, we were married in a church I'd been to twice in my whole life. I was 19 years old. Pause, I didn't know a damn thing about love. I just knew what I was supposed to do. For the first few years, it felt like we were playing house. We had a little apartment above a hardware store. She'd make dinner, I'd come home from work. We'd sit together and listen to the radio. It felt fine. Not good, not bad, just fine. By the time I was 25, we had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I worked double shifts to pay the bills, came home exhausted. Dorothy stayed home with the children like mothers did. We barely spoke anymore. We were just functioning. 2 people running the same household. I kept thinking it would get better. That once the kids were older, once I made more money, once we had the house we wanted, then we'd be happy. Then we'd finally feel like we were supposed to feel. Dot clears throat. When I was 34, I got promoted. Supervisor position, good pay. We bought a house with a yard, 3 bedrooms, a garage. The American dream, they called it. And you know what I felt the day we moved in? Nothing. I remember standing in that empty living room, boxes stacked everywhere, Dorothy in the kitchen unpacking dishes, and I thought, this is it, this is my whole life. And I felt like I was suffocating. I didn't love her. I don't think I ever did. I loved the idea of her, the girl at the diner who smiled at me. But the woman she became, the woman I turned her into, we were strangers. The worst part wasn't that I didn't love her. The worst part was that she knew it. Pause, there was this night. I must have been 41, 42. We were sitting at the dinner table. The kids had already gone to bed, and out of nowhere she said, "Do you even like me, William?" Not love. Like I didn't answer right away. I should have lied. I should have said yes. But I just sat there staring at my plate, and the silence said everything. She started crying. Not loud, just quiet tears running down her face. And she said, "I spent 20 years trying to be enough for you, and I don't think I ever was." I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that it was me, that I'd married her for the wrong reasons and stayed for even worse ones. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, "I'm tired, Dorothy." And I went to bed. We never talked about it again. Not once in the next 22 years we stayed married. I had a son, Michael, good kid, smart. When he turned 21, he told me he'd met a girl. Said he wanted to marry her. They'd been together for 8 months. And I saw that same look in his eyes I'd had when I was his age. That desperate need to do the right thing instead of the real thing. I pulled him aside. I said, "Don't do this, you don't know her yet. Hell, you don't even know yourself." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. He said, "You married Mom young, you made it work." And I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to say, "No, son, I didn't make it work, I just survived it." But I didn't. Clear as throat, I smiled. I shook his hand. I watched him make the same mistake I did. He divorced her 6 years later. Hasn't spoken to me much since. I know 2 men from my generation, one's named Harold. Harold's 89, still married to his first wife, 68 years together, and every time I see him, he's miserable. Complains about her cooking, about her voice, about the way she folds his shirts. He told me once, "I should have left in 72, but by then what was the point? He's waiting to die just so he doesn't have to pretend anymore." Then there's a man named Gene. Gene married at 33, waited until he knew who he was. Met a woman who actually fit his life, not the life he thought he was supposed to have. They had 36 years together before she passed. And even now, at 85, when he talks about her, his whole face lights up. He told me once, "I'm grateful I didn't rush it, because when I found her, I was ready." That's the difference. It's not about staying, it's not about commitment, it's about whether you married a person or a Hawthorner. I married a placeholder. Here's what I didn't understand until I was 63 years old. I wasn't marrying Dorothy because I loved her. I was marrying her because I was terrified of being nobody. In that town, in that time, if you weren't married by 25 people talked. If you didn't have kids, you were incomplete. A real man had a wife, a house, a job, and he didn't complain. He just endured. So I built a whole life around what other people expected, and I called it love. Dorothy died in 2012. Pause. She was 74. We'd been separated for 6 years by then, but never divorced. She had a heart attack in her sleep, quiet, painless, gone. And when I got the call, you know what I felt? Relief, not sadness, not grief. Relief, because I didn't have to pretend anymore. I could have done this differently. I could have waited. I could have been honest with her, with myself, at 30, at 40, at 50. But I didn't. I wasted her life and mine because I thought suffering in silence was the same thing as being a good man. I was wrong if you're young and you think you need to get married because everyone else is, or because you've been together a year and it feels like the next step, or because you're afraid of being alone. Stop, you think you have time. You do, but not as much as you think. And once you say yes, once you build a life with someone you don't truly know, it becomes so much harder to leave. Not because of money, not because of kids, but because you'll convince yourself that enduring is the same as loving. It's not. I'm 87 years old. I spent 43 years married to a woman I respected but never loved. I have a son who doesn't call. I have grandchildren who barely know me. And the one thing I know for sure is this: marrying the wrong person doesn't just waste your life, it wastes theirs too. If this reached you, share it with someone who's about to marry someone because it feels like they're supposed to, not because they're ready. Tell me in the comments, did you marry too young or did you wait? What would you tell your younger self? I read every single one and subscribe, not for me, because you deserve to hear this before it's too late.